Okay, on to Chopin, Frédéric Chopin. Here shows Chopin as a young man. Chopin, born in Poland, but moved to France as a young man and never went back, never lived in Poland again. Spent the rest of his life in France, briefly Paris. Absolutely revolutionized the way piano music is written. And one of his first concerts, the composer Robert Schumann was in the audience. At the end, he got up, turned around, faced the audience, and he said, "Hats off, gentlemen, a genius." And he was right. Chopin was so far ahead of his time, absolutely unique in music history. And so he has always been very, very beloved by people all over the world. He was the first composer to really exploit the capabilities of the modern piano. He drew sonorities out of the piano that no one had ever thought of before. He made the piano sing. He's often called the poet of the piano, and I agree with that. He's certainly the most poetic. His music is aristocratic and yet very sensuous. It's by turns dramatic and romantic and all different moods. He wrote 2 piano concertos, some chamber music, but most of his output is for solo piano. He wrote books of waltzes and mazurkas and preludes and scherzos and ballades and nocturnes and etudes, and mostly for piano, and he never wrote anything bad. Or if he did, he threw it away. He destroyed it. Virtually everything he wrote is still in the active repertoire of pianists all over the world. He didn't write anything bad, or if he did, he threw it in the fire. There are other composers that sometimes did write some things that are not so good. Beethoven wrote a few things that just aren't very good. But you can forgive Beethoven for that, for the tremendous music that he did write that is unbelievable. But Chopin never wrote anything bad. Everything he wrote is just, it has that magic touch to it. He didn't live very long. He only lived 4 years longer than Mozart. He died at the age of 39. The next one shows a piano that he used for many years, an old upright piano. There's a score of his music writing. He really tended to belabor pieces to death. That was the last piano that he owned, actually. But if he had a musical idea, he'd sit down and make a rough draft of it, and he'd work at it and belabor it for days and weeks on end, frustrating, scratching things out, rewriting things, pacing back and forth, breaking his pens in frustration. And the interesting thing is at the end of many weeks of work, he generally ended up with almost exactly what he first started out with. He was right the first time around. That's his piano. There's a score. This is actually a photograph. The camera was invented during Chopin's lifetime. So this is a very, very, very old, one of the very first photographs ever taken. This is near the end of his life. He was not in good health. He was very, very sick at that time. But that was a photograph of him. And the next one is a famous portrait of Chopin by Delacroix, which I think is very artistic. But Chopin certainly has found a place in the hearts of people around the world. Now I'm going to play a nocturne. About a year ago, I saw a movie called The Pianist. And by the way, that's how it's pronounced, pianist, right? In case you've heard pianist and pianist and didn't know which is correct and didn't know who to ask, it's pianist, right? I don't know what a piano is, but it's a pianist. If you have trouble remembering, just remember that a person who plays a trombone is not a trombonist, he's a trombonist. And a person who plays a guitar is not a guitarist, he's a guitarist. And a person who plays a piano is a pianist. Anyway, this is called The Pianist. It's the story of a concert pianist. It's based on a true story, by the way. A concert pianist who was trapped in the Warsaw Ghetto when the Nazis overran Poland. It's a gripping movie. Have anybody seen that? Let me see. Anybody? Yeah, some of you have. If you haven't, see it. It's a gripping movie. I highly recommend it. And it's a true story, too. A beautiful, wonderful movie. And the movie starts off with this concert pianist in a radio recording studio before the war. And he's playing this nocturne. And well, I'd heard the nocturne before. Yeah, it's beautiful, right? All Chopin nocturnes are beautiful. What is a nocturne anyway? Night music, right? Music to fall asleep by? Maybe, although in a lot of Chopin nocturnes, there's a violent thunderstorm that rises up in the middle of the night, in the middle of the nocturne. Not this one that I'm going to play. Anyway, he's playing this nocturne in the movie, and it is, I heard it before, but this time it sounded so beautiful. And I thought, I've never learned that one, I want to learn it. And so I did. and this is what it sounds like. Who could write like Chopin? I know I'm sounding like a broken record, aren't I? Well, who can write for the piano, I should say. This is quintessential piano music. Everything I've played up to this point, the Scarlatti, the Bach, the Mozart, and any of their contemporaries, Beethoven, Schubert, Haydn, you could play on almost any instrument and it would sound just about as good. Not with Chopin. Chopin is quintessential piano music. If you try to play it on any other instrument, it would sound silly. And that's why Chopin is a pianist composer, because the music he wrote is so idiosyncratic to the piano, to the instrument itself. And it's no wonder that he's so beloved all over the world. Okay, Chopin himself did not have a tremendous virtuoso technique like some of his contemporaries, like Franz Liszt, for example, but the delicate, shimmering sonorities that he brought out of the piano absolutely seduced his audience, often leaving them in tears. It was so beautiful. Okay, finishing up, Rachmaninoff shows him as a young boy. Rachmaninoff, late Russian romantic composer, pianist, conductor, last of the really great romantic composers in the Russian tradition, with a very, very distinctive sound. He was born in 1873 and passed away 6 days before I was born. Not that that means anything. That dates me, doesn't it? His music has a very, very distinctive sound to it, unmistakable, kind of sad, melancholy, complaining, yearning kind of sound to it. I think he was influenced very much by the very sad and sometimes tragic history of the Russian people. I think it could not help but have influenced the way he wrote music and the kinds of things that he was trying to express in music. He studied the Moscow Conservatory, and when he graduated, the graduation required a jury exam in which the candidate was supposed to perform some of his own compositions if he also composed. And Rachmaninoff did that. And on his jury exam, when he graduated, on the jury was Tchaikovsky himself. And in those days, you could get a score from 1 to 5. Almost no one ever got a 5. But the next day, when the scores were published, Tchaikovsky had given Rachmaninoff, young Rachmaninoff, not only a 5, but he put a plus before it, a plus above it, a plus below it, and 2 pluses after it. He recognized the great genius that was there with Rachmaninoff. He was a phenomenal pianist. Look at his hands. He had such a hand span. With one hand, he could play with the 5 fingers this. It takes me 2 hands to play that. That's the span that he had. His hand span was so enormous. And he wrote all his piano music as though everybody that's going to play it has that kind of hand span too. Mean man he was. Nasty trick. Who can do it? Anyway, the next one shows him at the Steinway. He had a great sense of humor, though, too. He was giving a violin and piano recital in the early part of the 20th century with the famous late 19th and early 20th century violinist Fritz Kreisler. You recall the name? And midway through one of the pieces, Fritz Kreisler had a memory slip. Just suddenly lost it. And after fiddling around for a few moments, he whispered out of the corner of his mouth to Rachmaninoff, "Where are we?" And without missing a note, Rachmaninoff whispered back, "In Carnegie Hall!" The next photo shows him very late in life, as many people remembered him. Great, great pianist, great conductor, and composer as well. We've seen quite an evolution of piano from that first spindly little cembalo called piano e forte, and we're ending up now, as you can see, with quite a monster, aren't we? Right? That's what we have here, a Steinway Concert Grand. From a pathetic tone to a monster that can squeak and can roar like a lion, can't it? The next picture shows, again, what the kind of piano we have here. It's an interesting evolution of the piano, isn't it? I'm going to play two preludes that Rachmaninoff wrote. Now, the first one, and first of all, what's a prelude? Well, with Bach, it was something that came before something else, wasn't it? By the time Rachmaninoff lived, prelude, the term prelude didn't mean anything. They could be independent, standalone pieces. If you wrote a piece of music and didn't know what to call it a prelude, right? Doesn't mean anything in particular. The first one that I'm going to play, to me, represents contrasts. Sweet memories, sad memories. Like sunshine and clouds, smiles and tears. Though I better be careful of what I tell you, because it may strike you differently than it strikes me. That's the disadvantage that instrumental music has. We don't have words. Vocal music has the words. There's a story. We know what it's all about, don't we? Whether it's a gospel choir singing, or a rock artist belting out something in a rock concert, or the Metropolitan Opera singing an opera. There's words. There's meaning to it. There's a story. But instrumental music rarely has. I mean, there's some. Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, the big booming of the cannon. You know that it's about the 1812 War of 1812, right? Or Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, where you have the bird calls, the chirping of the birds in the forest. But most instrumental music doesn't have a story. It's a disadvantage, and yet I feel that if instrumental music is well written by a great composer, it has the ability to express emotions which cannot be expressed in words. We have certain feelings inside, but we can't put our finger, we can't describe it. It's something we feel. And so I better be careful about telling you what I think this or that piece sounds like to me, because Rachmaninoff might come and haunt me. He might give me a nightmare tonight and in my dream and say, no, that's not what I was thinking when I wrote that piece. There's no story. It's not that at all. It's musical poetry without words. Don't try to make up a story. So what I play, you may have a very different opinion of. But anyway, that's the first one. The second one I'm going to play is, he marks alla marcia, like a march. And except for a very lyrical middle section, it is very, very much a march-like kind of piece, which at the very end vanishes like in a puff of smoke into thin air. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, one encore.
Yeah, and
2 years ago, remember I played a piece by the name, by composer by the name of Louis Moreau Gottschalk, American pianist and composer, died shortly after the Civil War. He was a pianist, very charismatic, toured Central and South America and in Europe, where he was all the rage because the Europeans could not believe that a violent, barbaric, uncivilized country like the United States could actually produce a musician, let alone composer. But he used to come on stage wearing white gloves, like Liberace. Right? He'd take off these white gloves very ceremoniously. And during the concert, all the women in the audience would swoon. They swooned a lot in the 19th century, apparently. And at the end of the concert, he would drop one of his white gloves on the piano as he walked off the stage, at which point the stage was mobbed by all the women who fought tooth and nail to get a few precious threads of that white glove as a memento. 19th century, great time. Anyway, I recall I played a piece that he wrote called The Banjo, which he had published in France to give a little extra snob appeal. I mean, just think of how many more copies you could sell. Instead of calling it the banjo, you could call it le banjo, right? Anyway, I'm going to play another piece by Louis Moreau Gottschalk. By the way, he wrote one of the hymns in our hymn book, God Our Father, Hear Us Pray. That's Gottschalk. He didn't write it as a hymn, but that's his melody, that's his tune. I'm going to play a piece that he wrote called Tournament Gallop. Now, you know what a tournament is. This gallop is spelled with one L, G-A-L-O-P. Gallop in the 19th century was a dance, a popular dance in 2/4 time, very popular in the early and mid-19th century. And this tournament gallop starts the way you'd think a tournament starts, with the trumpets and the drums are announcing, calling all of the contestants to come to the starting line, right? And this little gallop with one L, somehow by the time it gets near the finish line, seems to gain an additional L and become more of the kind of gallop that we're familiar with. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming. Isn't that silly? Fun though. Mozart, it is not. I'd like to thank you all for coming and thank especially my wife for the patience she's shown with me in this project, and thank President Gar for this opportunity. And I would especially, I cannot finish without giving credit where credit is due, and that is to a very kind Father in heaven who, for some unknown reason, has given me the opportunity in my old age to enjoy this beautiful music. Because without his help through this program, there is no way I could have gotten through all this difficult music without repeatedly breaking down. And so I thank him from the bottom of my heart. And I thank all of you for coming and allowing me to share this music with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for the light.